He ruled an empire with blood and fear. Yet a secret haunted him, a wound no gun could heal. Sterile, betrayed, and alone, Lorenzo Visconti thought he had lost everything, until a miracle appeared in the darkest night, and with it, a truth someone killed to keep hidden. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see who's joining this story tonight. The door to the Palermo Social Club creaked open like a warning. Even at midnight, the place was alive. Cards slapping against felt tables, drunken laughter spilling over cheap whiskey, smoke curling in slow spirals under the dim lights. But the real business of the Visconti Empire never happened out there with the gamblers and hustlers. It happened in the back rooms, behind locked doors, behind silence. Lorenzo the Viper. Visconti walked through the club with the quiet authority of a man who owned every inch of it, from the cracked leather stools to the desperate souls praying for another chance at life or money. Men straightened when they saw him. Conversations died. Cigars froze mid-air. Power radiated off him in a way that suffocated the room. Yet tonight, power meant nothing. Tonight, his hands were cold. He pushed open the door to the private back room, the one only he and his father had ever used, and stepped into a world of shadows. One flickering overhead bulb cast a sickly halo over a scarred wooden table. 2 chairs, a decanter of untouched bourbon, and Dr. Ernesto Fiore, the family physician, pale and trembling, clutching a sealed envelope like it was a bomb. Lorenzo didn't greet him. He simply shut the door and waited. Fiore swallowed hard. Don Visconti, before I hand you these results, I need you to understand. Stop. Lorenzo's voice cut through the air like a blade. Give me the truth. No explanations. Fiore's hands shook as he extended the envelope. Lorenzo snatched it without hesitation. He ripped it open in one brutal motion. A single sheet slid out. Medical terms, percentages, numbers. He understood none of it at first glance, but he understood the bold phrase typed in cold clinical ink: severe oligospermia. Probability of natural conception, 2%. The words didn't feel real. They didn't even feel human. They felt like the report of a gun, except this shot didn't hit flesh. It hit legacy, bloodline, pride, everything the Visconti Empire stood on. Lorenzo forced the breath from his lungs. Explain. Fiore wiped sweat from his hairline with a trembling hand. The scarring from the gunshot wound you took during the Messina ambush. It was deeper than we realized. The damage to the surrounding tissue. How long have you known? Lorenzo's voice was soft, deadly soft. I suspected months ago when your recovery stalled, but the final tests were completed this week. Don Visconti, I'm very sorry. Sorry. What a useless word. Lorenzo sat heavily in the chair, elbows on his knees, the paper crumpled in his fist. For years, his father had hounded him about producing an heir, lecturing about duty, lineage, keeping the Visconti name alive. To the old man, a son wasn't a child. A son was a symbol, a weapon, a guarantee that the empire lived on. But Lorenzo was broken in the one way that mattered most: a king without a future, a man without a bloodline. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles throbbed. No one knows of this? No one, Fiore said immediately. Not the Don, not Riccardo, not your men. And you will ensure it stays that way. Fiore nodded quickly. Of course. Lorenzo rose, towering above the doctor. If this gets out, he said quietly, if even a rumor spreads, I won't ask who talked. I'll bury every man who had access to this room tonight. Fiore's voice cracked. I understand. Lorenzo didn't shout. He didn't break anything. He didn't even curse. His silence was worse. Much worse. He folded the paper once, twice, then slid it into the drawer beneath the table. The same drawer that held his Beretta. his handwritten will, and a list of people he had sworn to kill someday. The results fit perfectly there. He closed the drawer, turned away, and something inside him cracked like glass. For a moment, just a moment, Lorenzo imagined a different life. A woman he could trust, a child he could hold, a future not built on blood. But fate had different plans. He straightened his jacket, restoring the armor of the dawn, the mask, the monster the streets feared. "This never happened," he said. Fiore nodded furiously. "I'll destroy the copies, all of them. And your assistant? She knows nothing. She better not." Lorenzo walked to the door, each step measured, controlled. But inside, everything was burning. He opened the door and stepped back into the smoky club. The noise swallowed him instantly. Laughter, shouts, the clatter of poker chips. Men greeted him with nods and fear. To them, he was unshakable, untouchable, eternal. Only he knew the truth, but power wasn't the only thing following him tonight. As he crossed the floor, a figure sitting at the bar subtly turned away. Too subtly. A man in a plain black jacket pretending to nurse a drink. Lorenzo's instincts sharpened. He never forgot a face. This one didn't belong here. He walked out into the night, the cool air slapping his skin, the weight of the diagnosis crawling up his spine like poison. He didn't see the man step out of the shadows behind him, didn't hear the faint click of a camera shutter, didn't feel the hungry eyes tracking him like prey. All he heard was the distant hum of traffic and the thud of his own heart beating against a truth he wished he could kill. The photograph burned bright on the stranger's camera screen as he zoomed in. A perfect shot of Lorenzo Visconti holding the fertility report. A secret worth millions. A secret that could destroy him. In the alley behind the club, the stranger sent the photo to an encrypted number and typed 3 words, "He is broken." And the reply came instantly. "Good. Begin." Rain slammed against the windshield like bullets as the black convoy sped through Palermo. 3 SUVs, Visconti insignias hidden, plates fake, windows bulletproof, cut through the night traffic with ruthless precision. The streets were slick, reflecting red and gold from the city's neon lights. Inside the lead vehicle, Lorenzo sat stone still, watching one of his youngest soldiers bleed into the leather upholstery. Blood pooled beneath the boy's ribs in a slow, spreading stain. "Stay awake," Lorenzo ordered. I'm trying, Don," the soldier gasped, gripping his side. "It was an ambush. They were waiting." Lorenzo didn't need the details. Ricardo should have warned him. Someone should have seen the trap coming. But tonight, failure had eaten through his ranks like a virus. "Drive faster," Lorenzo snapped. The driver pressed harder on the accelerator. They barreled into the hidden underground entrance of the Visconti family's private clinic, a small, discreet trauma center disguised as an ordinary medical building. Only a handful of trusted physicians knew who their patients truly were. Only a handful lived long enough to treat them twice. The SUV screeched to a halt. Lorenzo was out of the door before it fully opened. He scooped the bleeding soldier up with one arm, ignoring the blood soaking through his white shirt. "Get a trauma surgeon," he barked. The night staff scrambled. But then a woman emerged from the hallway at a sharp, purposeful stride. Scrubs, gloves already on, eyes sharp as a scalpel, Dr. Alessia Rossi. Lorenzo didn't know her name yet, but the moment he saw her, something in the world shifted, something subtle, like a warning or a promise. "What happened?" she asked as she guided him toward the operating room. "A knife," Lorenzo replied. Deep, intentional. She didn't panic, didn't flinch. Her gaze briefly flicked up to him, taking his measure, noting the expensive watch, the blood-spattered shirt, the commanding presence. She seemed to understand instantly that this man was dangerous, very dangerous. But she didn't hesitate. "Put him here," she said. Lorenzo laid the soldier on the table. Alessia checked the wound swiftly, pressing her gloved fingers against the torn flesh. "He's losing too much blood," she said. "If we don't close the artery in the next 5 minutes, he'll crash." "Then save him," Lorenzo ordered. Her eyes met his again, calm, unwavering. "I intend to." She slipped into her element with chilling precision. Tools clinked against metal trays, monitors beeped, nurses scrambled to keep up with her rapid-fire instructions. Clamp, suction, more pressure. "Get me the 4-0 suture." Lorenzo watched, arms crossed, knuckles white. He had seen hundreds of men bleed out, thousands even, but this time, something about her steadiness, her focus, made the room feel different. She didn't just treat a wound, she fought for life. In a world where everyone fought for power, money, dominance, this woman fought for something he hadn't touched in years: humanity. Alessia worked tirelessly, her brow furrowed, her movements flawless. The soldier groaned once, then went silent. Lorenzo tensed, ready for the worst. But Alessia didn't waver. "Relax," she murmured to the unconscious boy. "I'm not letting you die tonight." It wasn't meant for Lorenzo, yet he felt the words land on him anyway. 10 agonizing minutes later, she pulled her hands back, chest rising and falling fast. "Artery sealed," she said. "He'll need a transfusion, but he's stable." Lorenzo exhaled slowly. She saved him. This woman, this stranger, had just saved a soldier the Mafia couldn't afford to lose. "You did well," Lorenzo said, voice low. "I did my job," she corrected. Most people quivered in his presence. Most avoided eye contact, afraid of the shadow that followed him. But Alessia held her ground. Her spine was straight, her eyes steady, her hands still stained with a stranger's blood. He liked that. Without breaking her gaze, she added, "Next time, try to keep your men out of knife fights." Lorenzo almost smiled. Almost. He'd forgotten what that felt like. "I'll take your advice under consideration." She removed her gloves with a snap and handed them to a nurse. "You're not from around here," she said. "At least you don't seem like the type who frequents underground clinics at midnight." "You'd be surprised where I go," he replied, "and who you bring bleeding through my doors." She shot back. Courage, fire, honesty. He felt those traits carve themselves into his memory. A nurse approached nervously. "Dr. Rossi, he's ready for transfer to recovery." "Good," she said. Then, turning to Lorenzo, "Who should we contact for family?" "I am his family," Lorenzo answered. Her eyes narrowed slightly, reading between the lines. She wasn't stupid. She saw the scars beneath his cuff, the tension in his shoulders, the way the other men deferred to him. Danger recognized danger. But instead of backing away, she simply nodded, professional, composed. "Then I'll update you after his vitals stabilize." Lorenzo stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint scent of antiseptic and jasmine on her skin. "Dr. Rossi," he said slowly, tasting her name, "I appreciate your skill." "It's what I was trained for," she replied evenly, though her pulse betrayed her. Just a quick flutter in her throat he noticed instantly. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. "Still," he murmured, "you managed to impress me." Her lips parted for a reply, but the lights suddenly flickered, once, twice. Then the hallway plunged into near darkness as emergency power hummed to life. Alessia stiffened. "That shouldn't happen. Our backup generator has never failed." Lorenzo's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "The wolf is watching." His jaw clenched. Ricardo? Or someone worse? Another message came instantly, and she is in his sights. Lorenzo's eyes snapped to Alessia. She stood there, illuminated only by the emergency lights, unaware that someone, somewhere, had marked her. Not because she saved a soldier, because she had caught Lorenzo's attention. And in the Mafia, that was a death sentence. Before he could respond, a black car slowly crept past the glass entrance of the clinic. No headlights, tinted windows, moving with predator-like precision. Lorenzo moved toward the door, but the car stopped. The window rolled down. A camera lens pointed directly at Alessia. Click. The car sped away, leaving Lorenzo with a single chilling realization. Someone had just marked Alessia Rossi as leverage. And leverage, in his world, never survived long. The week after the clinic incident, Lorenzo found himself replaying the same memory on an endless loop. Alessia standing under the flickering emergency lights, blood on her gloves, defiance in her eyes, completely unaware that someone had taken her picture. He had seen thousands of faces in his life, fearful, greedy, violent, but hers stuck to his mind like a scar, calm, bright, untouched by the filth of his world. He tried to forget her. He failed. On the fourth night, when he found himself driving past the clinic again, without planning, without thinking, he realized something dangerous. She had gotten under his skin. Lorenzo Visconti did not allow anyone under his skin. So he crafted a safer version of himself, a mask, a lie with smooth edges and polished charm. Lorenzo Venti, wealthy shipping magnate, discreet businessman, impeccably respectable on paper, a man a woman like Alessia might actually open the door for. When he walked into the clinic again, the nurses nearly tripped over themselves. He never came for follow-ups. Usually his men handled everything. But tonight, he was a different man. "Is Dr. Rossi available?" he asked, his voice softer than the charged dominance he used with his soldiers. The nurse blinked at him, flustered. She's in her office. Should I?" "No," he said. "I know the way." He didn't, but he found it anyway. Her office door was slightly open, light spilling into the hallway. He saw her before she saw him, reading a chart, her brow drawn in concentration, hair tied in a loose knot she kept pushing back in irritation. It shouldn't have looked so mesmerizing. He knocked. Her head lifted. Surprise flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Venti," she said. The alias slid from her tongue like silk. He almost felt guilty. Almost. "You weren't due for any updates on your man for another week," she continued. "Is everything all right?" "I came to thank you personally," he said, stepping in. "You saved his life." She crossed her arms, not defensive, simply composed. That's what doctors do. Lorenzo studied her. Most people bragged about saving a Don soldier. Most slipped hints, showed off, tried to curry favor. Not her. "Then allow me to show my gratitude," he said. "Dinner, tonight." She blinked. "Dinner? If you're free." She hesitated. He saw the push and pull behind her eyes, caution versus attraction. She was smart enough to sense there was danger in him. Smart enough to know that kind of danger usually came wrapped in tailored suits and expensive watches. But she was also human, and Lorenzo Visconti was difficult to refuse. After a long breath, she said, "One dinner, that's all." He smiled. "For now." The restaurant he chose wasn't loud or excessive. It was quiet, candlelit, tucked along a cliff overlooking the sea, a place for secrets and seduction. When Alessia arrived, she wore a simple black dress, nothing extravagant but elegant enough to make the waiters pause. When she sat across from him, he felt something absurd rise in his chest. Peace. He hadn't felt peace since he was 17. They talked about medicine, about her family, loud, chaotic, relentlessly loving, about his work, which he fabricated with expert precision. He didn't tell her about the bullets he'd dodged, the men he'd buried, the blood he'd spilled before breakfast. He told her about shipping routes and investments and port negotiations, lies, smooth, easy lies. But when she laughed, soft and honest, he realized something terrifying. He wanted to be the man she believed he was. For 2 hours, he let himself pretend. After dessert, they walked along the cliffside. The sea breeze toyed with her hair. She looked fragile in the moonlight, yet stronger than anyone he'd met. "Why did you decide to become a doctor?" he asked. "My father died of a heart attack when I was 13, she said. "The paramedics arrived too late. I wanted to be someone who could save people the way no one saved him. Lorenzo's chest tightened. He had killed fathers, brothers, sons. He didn't deserve to walk beside her, but he still reached for her hand, and she let him. Their romance grew with startling speed. Private dinners, quiet drives along the coast, a weekend trip to Milan where she dragged him into art museums. He dragged her into dark corners where her breath hitched and her fingers trembled. He never pushed her. She never asked too many questions. It felt imperfectly perfect. But every time she spoke about her future, children she wanted someday, a big house full of life, Lorenzo felt the truth clawing at him like a beast begging to be unleashed, sterile, broken, lying through his teeth. One night she rested her head on his chest and whispered, "One day I want a family." A knife twisted inside him. He kissed her forehead and said nothing. 2 months in, he realized something he'd never expected. He was in love with her, deeply, irretrievably. A Mafia don in love with a trauma surgeon. A man built of violence in love with a woman built of light. It was doomed from the start. But he didn't care. He bought a ring. A diamond large enough to blind a nation. A symbol as heavy as guilt itself. He invited her to the rooftop of the oldest hotel in Palermo. Lanterns glowed around them. The city stretched beneath them like a kingdom he ruled in shadows. She arrived breathless, cheeks pink from the climb, eyes sparkling with curiosity. He took her hands, kissed her knuckles, and lowered himself onto one knee. "Alessia Rossi," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Marry me." Her eyes widened, shock, joy, disbelief, all tangled together. "Lorenzo," she whispered. I didn't expect." "Say yes," he murmured. She did. The moment the ring slid onto her finger, the world shifted again, only this time darker, because from the rooftop opposite them, a camera lens glinted. A figure stood in the shadows, watching through the scope of a high-powered rifle, his breath fogging the glass. He aimed directly at Alessia, not at her heart, at the ring, at the symbol, at the weakness. Lorenzo felt the hair on his neck rise. Instinct, danger, violence. He turned, too late. A shot cracked across the city. Glass shattered. Alessia screamed. The bullet tore through the lantern beside them, spraying fire, sparks, and shards, before embedding in the railing inches from Alessia's throat. Someone had just sent a message. "She is your weakness, and I will destroy her to destroy you." The Visconti wedding was a spectacle Palermo hadn't seen in decades. Hundreds of guests filled the ancient cathedral. Politicians, businessmen, social elites, people too wealthy or too powerful to question the presence of discreet security at every door. No one knew the truth of the groom's empire. No one realized the groom wasn't just rich. He was feared. But Alessia, radiant in ivory lace, knew none of that. She saw only Lorenzo, her soon-to-be husband, her impossible love, her future. He stood at the altar in a tailored black suit, the picture of composed devotion. If the stained glass windows behind him cast him as a saint, it was nothing more than an illusion, because the devil always looked divine at the moment he sealed a soul. When Alessia walked down the aisle, every breath left Lorenzo's body. She looked like something he had no right to touch, yet he was about to bind her life to his. Forever. Her father was gone. Her mother cried softly. Her brothers glared at Lorenzo with protective suspicion, but Alessia only saw him. When her hand slipped into his chest tightened with something savage, love mixed with dread. He knew he was being selfish. He knew he was building a future on a lie, but he couldn't let her go. Not now. Not ever. The ceremony blurred. Vows were spoken, rings exchanged, applause roared like thunder, and just like that, Alessia Rossi became Alessia Venti, or so she believed. The reception was held in a palatial villa overlooking the sea, marble floors, gold chandeliers, and guards disguised as waiters. Alessia laughed with her friends, blissfully unaware of the predators mingling among the guests. Lorenzo kept her close, one hand on the small of her back, eyes scanning every corner of the room. He felt it. Something off, something wrong. A shift in the air, subtle but sharp enough to raise the predator inside him. Riccardo Marino arrived late, Lorenzo's most trusted underboss, his right hand, his childhood brother by bloodshed, if not by blood. Tonight, Riccardo kissed Alessia's cheek and congratulated her. His smile was perfect. Too perfect. Lorenzo's instincts snarled, but Alessia noticed nothing. She glowed, dancing barefoot under lanterns, champagne in hand. When she pulled Lorenzo onto the dance floor, he let her draw him into her warmth, ignoring the icy warning crawling up his spine. For a few minutes, he let himself forget the danger, forget the lies, forget the world waiting to break them. Her cheek rested on his chest, her fingers curled in his shirt. Her laughter slipped into him like light breaking through prison bars. He kissed her hair and whispered against it, "You're mine now." She smiled. "I always was." Hours later, the celebrations ended. The guests left. The villa fell silent. Lorenzo led Alessia to the penthouse suite overlooking the moonlit ocean. Rose petals lined the floor, candles glowed, the scent of jasmine drifted from the open balcony. She turned toward him with shy anticipation, fingertips brushing the buttons of his shirt. He caught her hand gently. He should tell her everything before the night went any further. But he couldn't. Not tonight. Not when she looked at him like that. "Lorenzo," she whispered, "I love you." Those words sealed the doom. He kissed her, slow, reverent, a confession in silence. The world outside ceased to exist. For one fragile heartbeat, he believed they could be normal. Then, a metallic click, a sound too familiar, too lethal. His eyes snapped open. Two shadows burst through the balcony doors, black masks, silenced weapons raised. "Down!" Lorenzo roared, shoving Alessia to the floor. Gunfire erupted, muffled but deadly. Glass shattered. Candles toppled, flames licking at the curtains. Lorenzo grabbed the gun hidden beneath the bedside table. He always kept one close, and fired back with ruthless precision. One attacker fell. The other dodged behind a wall pillar. "Stay down," he shouted to Alessia, but she crawled toward him, terror flooding her eyes. "Lorenzo, what's happening? Who are they?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not when he recognized the tattoo on the attacker's wrist as the man lunged again. A wolf, Riccardo's symbol. Betrayal hit him like a blade to the spine. He shot the attacker point blank. Blood splattered the walls. Alessia screamed. The room smelled of gunpowder and fire. Before Lorenzo could catch his breath, a third figure stepped into the doorway, calm, unmasked, hands behind his back. Riccardo. Alessia froze. "Riccardo? What?" Lorenzo aimed his gun at him, fury shaking his hands. "You dare!" Riccardo smirked, cold, triumphant. "Poison. I told you marrying an outsider would weaken you," he said. "I wasn't wrong." "You betrayed me," Lorenzo growled. "No," Riccardo corrected, stepping closer. "I removed your weakness." His eyes flicked to Alessia. She went pale. Lorenzo lunged forward, ready to kill him with his bare hands. But Riccardo's men swarmed the hallway behind him, weapons drawn, outnumbering Lorenzo 10-1. Riccardo leaned in, voice a dagger of venom. "I warned them you wouldn't die easily, so I told them to aim for her first." Alessia gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Lorenzo's heart stopped. "You touch her," he snarled, "and I'll tear you apart piece by piece." Riccardo smiled. "That's why she needs to go." He snapped his fingers. More gunmen stormed the suite. Lorenzo grabbed Alessia, pulling her behind him, firing desperately, rage and fear merging into something primal. Bullets flew. Glass exploded. Flames roared higher. Alessia sobbed into his back. "Lorenzo, what is happening? Who are you?" The truth ripped from his throat in a snarl. "I'm not a businessman, Alessia." He killed another attacker. "I'm the Dawn of the Visconti family." Her breath left her. Her world shattered. Her knees buckled, and Ricardo's voice slid through the smoke like poison. "Welcome to your husband's real life, Mrs. Visconti." Lorenzo shot at him, missed by inches, as Ricardo retreated through the flames. The gunmen withdrew with him, vanishing like ghosts. Lorenzo hauled Alessia into his arms as sirens wailed in the distance. Her tears soaked his shirt. Her voice trembled, broken. "You lied to me. From the beginning." Lorenzo opened his mouth. But before he could speak, a red laser dot appeared on Alessia's chest. A sniper. The attack wasn't over. Lorenzo tackled Alessia to the floor as a bullet tore through the window, embedding in the headboard where her skull had been seconds earlier. And from a rooftop across the street, a voice whispered into a headset, "The Dawn's bride is marked. Kill her next." The Visconti safe house was built like a bunker. Steel doors, bulletproof glass, panic rooms hidden behind wall panels. But none of it could protect Alessia from the truth unraveling around her. The moment Lorenzo carried her inside after the attack, the place exploded into motion. Soldiers lined the hallways, radios crackled, orders barked in rapid Italian. The security cameras rotated in perfect synchrony, sweeping across every inch of the perimeter. To them, this was war. But to Alessia, it felt like she'd been dragged into someone else's nightmare. She stood in the middle of the living room, barefoot, still wearing the tattered remains of her wedding dress, shaking uncontrollably. "Someone get a medic," a soldier shouted. "No," Lorenzo snapped, stepping between them. "I'll take care of her." He reached for her hand. She pulled it away like his touch burned her. A flicker of pain twisted across his face, but he said nothing. He simply gestured toward the inner hallway. "Come with me," he murmured. "It's safer." "Safe?" Alessia whispered. "You told me you were a businessman, and tonight I was shot at on my wedding night. Nothing about you is safe." The room froze. Every soldier looked away. No one interfered. No one breathed. They all knew she was right. Lorenzo lowered his head, voice strained. "Then let me explain everything." She hesitated but followed him down the hall. He led her to a dimly lit study, shelves filled with old books and locked drawers she suddenly feared. He closed the door behind them and leaned against it, as if blocking her escape. "Talk," she said, arms wrapped around herself. He inhaled deeply. "I was born into this world," he began quietly. "I didn't choose it." She didn't speak. "My family, the Visconti family, controls Palermo's underworld. I inherited the throne after my father." His jaw tightened. "The alliances, the enemies, the blood feuds, they all became mine." Her breathing quickened. "You lied to me from the start." "I hid the truth," Lorenzo said, stepping closer, "because I knew you wouldn't look at me if you knew what I was." "You're right," she whispered. "I wouldn't have." His jaw clenched. "And yet," he said softly, "you married me." She looked away. He continued. "Ricardo wants my seat. He's been plotting for months. Tonight was only one step. He thinks you're a weakness." Alessia flinched. "A weakness?" He cursed under his breath. "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked back the tears. "You should have told me the truth," she said, stepping back. "Before the wedding. Before everything." "I know," he whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy, choking. "But," she said slowly, "there's something I still don't understand." He lifted his head. "Why me?" she asked. "Why choose me when you live in a world full of danger and lies?" He stared at her, expression raw. "Because you were the only light I had." She swallowed hard, throat tight. But the world he dragged her into snuffed that light out fast. In the days that followed, the mansion remained under constant lockdown. Soldiers rotated in 12-hour shifts. Ricardo moved like a shadow among them, whispering poison into the cracks of Lorenzo's empire. "She's a spy. She's the reason the hit happened. She'll be the death of him." Lorenzo shut down the rumors with violence more than words. But suspicion spreads like rot, and Ricardo fed it with skill. Alessia felt their eyes on her constantly, judging, accusing, waiting. She avoided everyone, including Lorenzo. He watched her from afar, at breakfast, in the hallway, in the courtyard, never approaching, never pressing, waiting for her to stop shaking long enough to breathe again. But she never did. The distance between them grew like a wound. Weeks passed. The house remained tense. Their marriage hung on thin threads. And then, one morning, Alessia sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the negative pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Her heart sank. Not again. Not another month of hope dissolving into disappointment. Lorenzo stepped in quietly. "Sia?" She didn't look up. "It's negative." His face tightened with something like guilt. She forced a smile, small, fragile. Maybe we should get tested." He froze. Alessia lifted her eyes. "You know, just to see if something is wrong." Lorenzo didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared at her like she had put a knife to his throat. "Alessia," he said slowly. Her heart stuttered. "Lorenzo." He took a step back, like distance would soften the blow he was about to deliver. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice hoarse. The air thickened. Her pulse raced. "What is it?" she whispered. His next words shattered the world. "I knew I was nearly sterile before I met you." She stared at him. "I was shot years ago," he continued. "The damage was severe. Dr. Fiore told me I had less than a 2% chance of being a father." Her breath shook violently. "You knew?" He nodded. "And you still married me?" He nodded again. Alessia's voice cracked. "Without telling me? Without letting me choose?" Lorenzo closed his eyes. "I couldn't risk losing you." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice turned cold. "You didn't give me a husband, Lorenzo. You gave me a lie." He stepped toward her. She stepped away. "You stole my choice," she whispered. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "You let me think there was hope. You let me think something was wrong with me." Her hands shook. "You let me cry. You let me break. And you said nothing." Lorenzo's voice cracked. "Alessia, I—" "Stop." She grabbed a coat from the chair. "I can't look at you right now. Sia, please." "I need air," she said, brushing past him. "I need space." He grabbed her arm. "It isn't safe out there." "I don't care," she snapped. He released her slowly, as if letting go physically was easier than letting go emotionally. Alessia walked down the hallway, steps unsteady, vision swimming with tears. She reached the front doors. It was raining outside, hard, relentless, almost violent. She opened the door and stepped into the storm. Lorenzo rushed after her. "Alessia!" But she kept walking, down the steps, into the dark, into the rain. He followed her, shouting her name, voice raw with desperation. She didn't turn back. Not once. From a balcony above, hidden in the shadows, Ricardo leaned on the railing with a cigarette between his fingers. He watched Alessia walk away. He watched Lorenzo break. And a slow, satisfied smile curled across his lips. Ricardo exhaled a plume of smoke and murmured to the soldier beside him, "Let her go. The dawn will bleed more this way." The streets of Palermo were no longer merely streets. They had become rivers of fire and fear. Smoke drifted from burning cars, the acrid scent of gunpowder mixing with the smell of charred buildings. Screams echoed through alleys where children once played and vendors once shouted. Now, the city belonged to men with weapons and men with grudges. Lorenzo Visconti sat alone in the study of his safe house, the bottle of whiskey in his hand shaking as violently as his hands. Empty glasses littered the desk. Documents detailing shipping routes, investments, and crime operations lay scattered beneath a small puddle of spilled bourbon. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had not cared. Alessia's absence haunted every corner of the mansion. Her laugh, her touch, her warmth, gone. The walls themselves seemed to echo her absence, reminding him of the fragility of the world he had built and the empire he had failed to protect. "Drink, Visconti," he muttered to himself, lifting the bottle again. The fire in the hearth reflected in his eyes, turning them to molten gold. The Don's empire might be intact physically, but its heart, Alessia, was gone, and Riccardo Marino was exploiting it. Riccardo moved like a shadow among the Visconti soldiers, whispering lies into the ears of men already unsure of who they owed allegiance. "She's a threat to the family. Don Lorenzo has lost his mind. Follow me if you want to survive." Slowly, one by one, soldiers shifted. The empire fractured. Those who had once bled for Lorenzo began to plot against him. The streets ran red, blood soaking into cobblestones that had known centuries of crime, but never this level of chaos. Lorenzo finally left the mansion, dragging himself onto the streets, his black overcoat whipping around him in the rain. Every corner he turned, a gun pointed, a soldier waiting for a signal, a whisper of betrayal floating on the wind. He had become a predator, yet he was also prey. A group of 3 soldiers approached him in a narrow alley. "Don Lorenzo," one stammered. "Riccardo, he says you need to step down." Lorenzo's laugh was dark and hollow. "I need to step down." His fist connected with the man's jaw before he could react. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed. The other 2 fell back instinctively, only to be shot at point blank by Lorenzo. The message was clear. Cross him. Die. He didn't stop. He didn't think. He didn't feel, at least not beyond the rage boiling inside him. The streets were his battlefield. Every corner, every shadow, every alleyway demanded blood, and he gave it willingly. Meanwhile, Alessia moved silently through the night, the rain soaking her hair and clinging to her skin. Her distant cousin guided her through winding streets, past abandoned factories and shuttered cafes. No one looked twice at the terrified young woman. She was a ghost, invisible. "I don't understand why she whispered, voice trembling. He's changed," her cousin replied. "Lorenzo? He's a different man?" "Yes, but we have to keep moving." Alessia's mind raced. Every heartbeat screamed for him, every memory of his touch a double-edged blade. She hated him. She loved him. She feared him. And she feared what Riccardo might do next. Back at the safe house, Lorenzo sat over a map, pins marking every known loyalist and every suspected traitor. Riccardo had made his move too cleanly. There were no mistakes, no mercy. Lorenzo had underestimated the wolf. He slammed his fist against the table. Pain, anger, shame. He rose, dripping wet from the rain, and left the mansion again. His men had split into factions. Every corner of Palermo became a battlefield. Shots fired in markets, in narrow alleyways, in opulent villas. Civilians ran screaming. Blood ran thick, dark, staining the rain-soaked streets. Lorenzo struck with cold precision. One by one, Riccardo's men fell under his blade, under his gun, under his wrath. Nothing human remained in him now. Nothing. He cornered a traitor in a deserted warehouse. The man pleaded, tears streaked through blood. "You'll pay," he screamed. "Pay with what?" Lorenzo spat. Your life? One pull of the trigger. Silence. And yet Alessia's absence burned hotter than any enemy he could face. She was gone. She had walked out of his life. And now he hunted the world for her, blind with rage. The next morning, soldiers whispered in hushed tones about Dr. Fiore, the Visconti family doctor. He'd gone missing during the chaos. Rumors spiraled. Riccardo had taken him hostage to expose Lorenzo's secret infertility, to strike the final blow at his family's legacy. Lorenzo stormed into the empty clinic. Cabinets were ransacked, medical records shredded, blood spattered faintly across the floor. Fiore was gone. He found a small envelope. Inside, a note. If you want the truth, you'll come to us, alone. Lorenzo crushed it in his hand. Fiore's life, Alessia's absence, Riccardo's treachery, it all collided inside him like a storm. Then, later that evening, news spread through the city like wildfire. A burned body was found in a back alley, unrecognizable except for a watch on its wrist. Fiore's watch. The soldiers whispered Riccardo had made his move. The family doctor, gone forever. Or at least that's what it seemed. Lorenzo's empire was bleeding, his family in pieces, and the only thing left to him was his rage. He clenched his fists, teeth grinding. "Riccardo," he hissed, "you've made a mistake. You've crossed a line." The air in the mansion seemed to thrum. Something primal, something feral had awakened in him, and Lorenzo realized with absolute certainty he would kill everyone standing in his way, every soldier, every traitor, every last man standing between him and his empire. As the news of the burned body reached him, Lorenzo stared at the skyline of Palermo, rain streaking down his face, and whispered through gritted teeth, "If Fiore is dead, Riccardo will pay with everything." Lorenzo sat alone in the ruins of his safe house, the walls still echoing with smoke and gunfire from the night before. Palermo had grown darker than he had ever known, the city bleeding under Riccardo's coup. Every corner, every alley, every street whispered his failures. Alessia was gone, taken by the storm of his lies and Riccardo's treachery, and Fiore, the family doctor, the only man who had known the fragile truth of his life, was dead, or so he believed. He clenched his fists around the railing of the balcony overlooking the city. Rain hammered down like judgment from the heavens, soaking him to the bone. His lips moved in a silent vow. "I will burn everything before I let him take what is mine." And so Lorenzo unleashed hell. The first strike was swift. Safe houses loyal to Riccardo erupted in fire and smoke. Armored cars carrying his enemies exploded into flames, the roar echoing through the narrow streets. Riccardo's men, once confident, now scrambled in terror, unprepared for the fury of a Don who had lost everything. Lorenzo moved like a shadow, gun in hand, eyes cold and sharp as broken glass. Every shot he fired was precise, every target eliminated with lethal efficiency. This was no longer strategy. This was pure vengeance. He cornered a lieutenant near the docks. "Where is he?" Lorenzo demanded, voice low, dangerous. The man whimpered. You'll never find him?" A single bullet silenced him. The streets ran red. Explosions tore through warehouses and garages. Smoke and fire lit the night sky, turning Palermo into a theater of war. The people below screamed, ran, prayed. None dared intervene. No one could. And then he found the signal. Riccardo's chosen battlefield, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It had once been a textile factory, now a decaying skeleton of iron beams and shattered windows. Perfect for a war between wolves. Lorenzo approached silently, every step measured, every shadow observed, his men trailing behind him, the loyal few who had survived Riccardo's lies. They moved like phantoms in the night, their loyalty forged in fire and blood. Inside, the warehouse was quiet. too quiet. The smell of rust and old oil hung heavy in the air, and then the voice. "Well, well." Ricardo stepped from the shadows, a cruel grin twisting his face. Lorenzo Visconti, the mighty Don reduced to a rabid animal hunting scraps. Lorenzo's hand moved to the gun at his side. Ricardo laughed, a dark, hollow sound. "You always think you're untouchable, but you've lost everything, haven't you?" He stepped closer, eyes burning. "I wanted her," Ricardo said suddenly, voice low and venomous. She could humanize me the way she did you. And now she is mine." Lorenzo's chest tightened. "You monster!" he hissed. The fight began. Ricardo lunged, knife flashing. Lorenzo blocked, bone cracking under impact. Punches landed with ferocious force. Flesh met flesh. Metal clanged against metal. Every strike was fueled by betrayal older than love, deeper than ambition. Ricardo fought dirty. Every trick, every strike, every elbow designed to maim. But Lorenzo fought with the precision of a predator, rage and pain fused into a lethal weapon. They crashed through crates, splintered wood flying in every direction. Dust choked the air. The sound of fists smashing against ribs echoed like cannon fire. Ricardo kicked Lorenzo into a pile of barrels, spraying oil across the floor. Flames licked the edges, threatening to engulf them both. Lorenzo rolled free, catching a chain and swinging it like a whip, striking Ricardo across the chest. The wolf faltered, but he wasn't done. He grabbed Lorenzo by the collar. "Do you know why I hate you?" he snarled. "Because you got everything I could never have. Power, respect, her. And she sees your weakness and she loves you anyway. I'll destroy it all." Blood ran down both their faces. Bone cracked. Muscles screamed. And still they fought. Lorenzo grabbed Ricardo by the throat and slammed him into the cold concrete. One final strike. A vicious uppercut. A snap. A scream. Ricardo fell. Lorenzo's boot pressed against his chest. "I am not losing her," Lorenzo growled. And with that, he ended it. The warehouse was silent, except for the sound of Lorenzo's ragged breathing. His fists were bloody, his knuckles broken, his ribs bruised. But the Don stood victorious. He had reclaimed his throne. The Visconti Empire remained his. Ricardo, the traitor, the wolf, was dead. Lorenzo leaned against a steel beam, sliding down to the floor, exhausted and battered. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind the raw ache of every wound he'd endured. Pain coursed through him. Every bruise, every cut, every broken bone a reminder that power came with a cost. He closed his eyes, wishing for a fleeting moment that it could be enough, that Alessia could be there, that Fiore could still be alive. A groan of movement caught his attention. He rose, scanning the wreckage, but no one remained. He sank back to the floor, finally allowing himself a single moment of reprieve. The warehouse smelled of smoke and iron. Every corner, every shadow was empty. He was alone. Then, the phone rang. The screen lit up. The letters burned bright in his vision. Alessia. Lorenzo froze. Every muscle in his body tensed. The warehouse, the blood, the fire, it all vanished in that instant. The world had stopped. Alessia, alive, calling. He pressed the phone with shaking hands. Every instinct screamed. Fear, hope, rage, love. The Don, who had conquered blood and betrayal, now faced the one truth he could not fight. She had returned. Lorenzo's heartbeat thundered as he answered, voice raw with emotion. "Alessia, is it really you?" But the line was silent for a moment. Then a trembling, urgent voice whispered, "Lorenzo, I need you. Now." The night was black, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning over the Calabrian hills. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. Lorenzo's black SUV tore through the storm like a beast, tires skidding, engine roaring. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Every heartbeat screamed Alessia's name. He gripped the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, eyes narrowing against the wind and rain. The streets of Calabria blurred past him. All his fury, all his bloodlust, all his empire-building power meant nothing. Nothing mattered but her, and the life inside her. The phone call replayed in his head. Sia, I need you, now. It had been trembling, desperate. Unlike any voice he had heard before, fragile, raw, yet filled with an unspoken command. He knew immediately. She was in labor, alone. His chest tightened. He drove faster. No traffic, no road, just mud, rain, and the need to reach her before it was too late. At the safe house, Alessia leaned against the wall, breath coming in short, sharp bursts, her hands pressed against her stomach as another contraction seized her body like fire. Her cousin, who had stayed to help, moved as best they could, guiding her toward the bedroom. "Lorenzo," she whispered into the phone again. "Please, hurry." Time slowed with every pulse of pain. Every second felt like a lifetime. Every scream tore at the walls of the small safe house. The door burst open. Lorenzo appeared, drenched, hair plastered to his head, clothes clinging with mud and rain. His eyes were bloodshot, wild, burning with something deeper than rage, love, fear, desperation. "Sia!" he shouted, rushing to her side. Her body collapsed into his arms, shaking violently as the next contraction took hold. I can't do this alone," she cried. "You're not alone," he said, voice low and fierce, wrapping his arms around her. "You're never alone. I'm here. I'm right here." Her tears fell onto his shoulder. Mixing with rain from outside, mixing with the sweat and blood and fear that hung heavy in the room. The labor was relentless. Minutes blurred into hours. Every contraction brought Alessia closer to exhaustion. Her hands clawed at Lorenzo's shoulders. He held her, whispered her name, and tried to calm her, even as panic clawed at the edges of his mind. "No, no, no," she moaned. "I can't." "Yes, you can," he said, his voice a growl. "You've already survived everything, Alessia. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." The first cries came, sharp and raw. Alessia gasped as Lorenzo, trembling, did the impossible. He delivered their child with his own hands. Matteo emerged into the world, tiny and perfect, a miracle among the storm. Alessia collapsed back, gasping, exhausted, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Lorenzo held the baby close to her chest. "Look," he whispered, voice thick. "He's here. He's ours." The room seemed to still. Time itself paused as Alessia reached out, trembling, and touched her son. And then she saw it. A small crescent moon-shaped birthmark on his wrist, the same mark Lorenzo bore, the same mark Don Salvatore bore. Her eyes widened. The truth crashed over her like lightning. This isn't possible," she whispered. Her voice shook, barely audible over the storm outside. "Lorenzo! The tests, the infertility." Lorenzo's heart stopped. He had stared at her for years, believing his bloodline was finished, that he could never father a child. And now, Matteo was living proof that someone had lied. Alessia's voice trembled again, barely above a whisper. "Lorenzo, Dr. Fiore didn't lie, someone else did." The words pierced him like a blade. Betrayal, deception, a conspiracy that ran deeper than Riccardo. And now, with Matteo in his arms, Lorenzo realized the full scope of the lies that had shaped his life. He cradled his son, looking down at the tiny fingers curling around his thumb. The birthmark glimmered in the dim light, a small, undeniable symbol of blood and truth. Alessia's voice broke through his thoughts. "Lorenzo, you need to know the truth." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm listening," he whispered. But even as Matteo cried softly between them, he knew, knowing the truth would not bring peace. It would bring war. The enemy who had manipulated his life, who had stolen years of his dreams, was still out there. and the next move would demand everything he had. Alessia clutched his hand, voice shaking with fear and revelation. Someone wanted to control you, control us, control everything. They used the blood tests, the lies, and now Matteo is the key. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He looked at his son, at the crescent moon birthmark, and then at Alessia. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside him, raging, violent, unstoppable. His fingers dug into her hand. No one will touch him. No one will ever hurt him. No one will ever hurt you again, he vowed. But deep in his chest, Lorenzo knew the battle was only beginning. The rain beat against the windows like drums of war. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the safe house for a brief, blinding moment. Alessia whispered again, her voice trembling with terror and urgency. Lorenzo, someone else did this. Someone powerful. Someone who wants to destroy everything you built and take Matteo from us. Lorenzo's eyes burned. Rage and resolve fused together. He had survived bullets, betrayal, and bloodshed. But this was personal. And as he held Matteo close, cradling the future of his bloodline in his arms, he made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth. He would destroy those who had lied to him. He would protect his family, even if it meant burning the world to the ground. Alessia whispered through tears, voice trembling. Lorenzo, the one who lied about the infertility, it's someone inside our own family, someone we trusted. And Matteo, he's the reason they'll come for us next. The safe house in Calabria had grown quiet, almost eerily so. Rain still streaked the windows, though softer now, a ghost of the storm that had carried Lorenzo across the hills. Matteo slept in a makeshift cradle beside Alessia, the tiny chest rising and falling with every fragile breath. Alessia had dozed off in exhaustion, her head resting against Lorenzo's shoulder, but the weight of the secret they carried made sleep impossible for him. Lorenzo's mind raced faster than the storm that had brought him here. Every lie, every betrayal, every manipulated test. He had to trace it, uncover the architect behind this monstrous deception. He had survived Ricardo's coup, he had fought the wolf, and yet nothing had prepared him for a betrayal from within his own bloodline. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his fingers like fingers of the past reaching out to choke him. Fiore's alive, he muttered, voice rough, and he knows everything. A knock at the door made him snap upright. It was a courier, soaked and trembling. In his hand, a letter, sealed with the unmistakable crest of the Visconti family. Lorenzo ripped it open. Lorenzo, your presence is required at the estate. A family meeting has been called. Salvatore. His pulse spiked. The word family carried all the weight of doom. Every instinct screamed danger. Alessia stirred beside him, eyes opening. They want you to walk into a trap, she whispered. I know, he said, flicking ash into a tray. Then don't go, she pleaded, clutching his arm. I cannot, not this time, he replied. The truth ends here, or it never ends at all. He made the journey back to Palermo under a gray, threatening sky. The Visconti estate rose like a fortress, dark stone and iron gates looming against the clouds. The air smelled of wet concrete and old blood. Every guard he passed looked uneasy, shadows flickering over faces that had long since learned to fear him, and yet tension ran higher than ever. Inside, the halls were silent, but Lorenzo could feel the eyes of his family on him. Every portrait of ancestors, every dusty relic, every golden crest whispered of loyalty and treachery in equal measure. He found Fiore waiting in the old study. The doctor looked older, thinner, but alive. Lorenzo, Fiore said quietly, you're alive. I know, Lorenzo said. Fiore, tell me everything, he demanded. Fiore hesitated, then spoke. Your infertility diagnosis, it was never accurate. It was doctored. Someone altered the results to make you believe you could never father a child. Lorenzo's chest tightened. Who? Who would— Your father, Fiore interrupted. The one man whose loyalty you never questioned. Don Salvatore orchestrated it. Lorenzo's mind shattered. Salvatore, the patriarch, the man whose word was law, whose gaze demanded obedience. The one who had taught him everything about power, control, and ruthlessness had betrayed him. Fiore continued, voice low but firm. He feared you would grow too powerful, that you would produce an heir to continue your line without his control. He wanted Riccardo installed as your successor, controlled, obedient, and malleable. Lorenzo's hands curled into fists, nails biting into his palms. The betrayal was biblical. The weight of his father's treachery was heavier than any bullet or blade he had endured. Every moment of doubt, every sleepless night, every tear Alessia shed, all of it had been orchestrated. And the charred body? Lorenzo asked, voice tight with fury. Fiore shook his head. Fake. Riccardo planted it. They wanted you to believe I was dead, to destabilize you further. But I'm alive. And I know the truth. Lorenzo's vision blurred with rage and pain. He wanted to strike, to destroy, to burn every piece of the empire that had been manipulated around him. He thought of Alessia, of Matteo, of everything they had fought to survive. The estate doors opened and Salvatore emerged, tall and imposing. His gaze was cold, calculating, a mask of patriarchal authority hiding a deeper, more twisted ambition. Lorenzo, he said, voice low but firm, you're here. Good. Sit. We have matters to discuss. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. You call orchestrating my infertility a matter to discuss. Salvatore's lips curved into the faintest smile. You misunderstand me, son. I acted to protect the family, to ensure the future of our empire. Lorenzo stepped forward, anger and disbelief coiling through his body like venom. Protect the family? You tried to destroy me. You tried to destroy Alessia. You tried to control my bloodline. Salvatore's eyes never wavered. Control ensures survival, he said. Survival at the cost of my son's life? Lorenzo shot back, voice breaking. You manipulated me, lied to me, watched me suffer for decades. Salvatore's expression hardened. You are weak when emotion controls you, Lorenzo. Power must be preserved, even if it means difficult choices. Lorenzo's hands trembled. He could strike here. He could destroy his father in the very halls that had raised him. But Alessia's voice echoed in his mind. Protect your family. Someone else orchestrated Riccardo. He whispered, voice low. Someone wanted control beyond what even you imagined. Salvatore's eyes flickered. Was it fear? Surprise? You speak of shadows, Lorenzo. Be careful. Such talk can make enemies of those closest to you. Lorenzo's pulse was a drumbeat of war. He felt the heat of Matteo in his mind, the fragile life that should never have existed under lies and deceit. Alessia's warning played again in his mind. Don't go. Don't face him alone. But he had no choice. The next steps would decide the fate of the Visconti line. He squared his shoulders, staring his father down. I will uncover every lie, every secret, every betrayal, and I will protect my family at any cost. Do you understand, father? Salvatore's lips tightened. I understand, son. But remember, family sometimes requires sacrifices. Some truths are better buried. Lorenzo's hands clenched. You will not bury the truth, not while I breathe. A tense silence filled the room. The air seemed to thrum with history, power, and impending violence. And then, Alessia appeared behind him, trembling. Lorenzo, she whispered, her hand on his arm, you don't have to do this alone. He turned, gaze softening for a heartbeat, then back to Salvatore. The family ends here if I fail, he said. but I will not fail." The room seemed to contract around them. Every heartbeat thundered like a drum of war. Every shadow whispered of the battles to come. Salvatore's voice cut through the silence, calm but deadly. "Then come, Lorenzo, sit. Let us see how far you've truly come. The family meeting begins, and only one of us will leave this room unchanged." The Visconti estate loomed ahead, silhouetted against the dying light of dusk. Its tall iron gates, weathered by decades of storms and neglect, seemed to mock Lorenzo as he approached. Every step on the gravel driveway echoed like a drumbeat of the past, each crunch of stone a reminder of years of lies, betrayal, and blood. Inside, the old halls smelled of dust and old leather, the air thick with history and resentment. Portraits of ancestors watched from the walls, their painted eyes following every movement. For the first time, Lorenzo felt the weight of every Visconti before him, every Don, every patriarch, every tyrant who had demanded obedience without question. Salvatore waited in the main hall, tall, imposing, his gray hair slicked back, eyes sharper than any blade Lorenzo had faced. "You came," Salvatore said, voice calm but carrying the gravity of decades of authority. "I always come," Lorenzo replied, every word heavy with restrained fury. The room crackled with tension, decades of resentment ready to ignite. Salvatore gestured at the grand chair behind him. "Sit, let us talk." "I don't come to talk," Lorenzo said, fingers twitching near his coat pocket where a gun rested. "I come to end this." Salvatore's eyes softened for just a fraction of a second, revealing the fear he had carried all these years. "You're dangerous, Lorenzo," he admitted. "You always were. I feared your ruthlessness, feared you would destroy what generations of Visconti built. I acted to protect the family, to control its future." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "You destroyed more than my control. You destroyed my life, my marriage, my trust, my faith in the very blood that runs through my veins. You lied about my infertility. You tried to manipulate me into impotence so your chosen heir could take my place. Everything. Ricardo, the lies, the coup, it was all orchestrated by you." Salvatore's face tightened. "You are my son. I raised you to be strong. But strength without control is chaos. I thought Ricardo could be the balance I never had. I never wanted Alessia harmed, but I couldn't risk you. Not yet." Lorenzo stepped forward, his rage building, coiling like a live wire in his chest. "You wanted control over me. You feared my power? You feared my love for her? Then hear me, Father. Power is worthless without loyalty, and loyalty without truth is nothing but a cage." Before Salvatore could respond, the estate's halls erupted with violence. Salvatore's loyal guards, hidden in the shadows, attacked. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through old wood and stone. The sound of gunshots, screams, and breaking furniture filled every corner of the manor. Lorenzo dove behind a marble pillar, bullets ricocheting dangerously close. He returned fire, moving with the lethal precision of a man forged in blood and fire. Every shot, every punch, every move was calculated, brutal, and merciless. The men who had once called him Don now sought to kill him for the sake of Salvatore's vision. He fought through the hallways, knocking down armed men, dodging knives and returning fire. The air smelled of gunpowder and iron, thick with the sweat of fear and adrenaline. Blood ran freely, not just from the guards, but from Lorenzo's own bruised and cut body. Each wound, each scratch, each heartbeat was a testament to his survival. Finally, he confronted Salvatore in the main hall again, their eyes locking across the debris-strewn floor. Salvatore's hands were raised, but the expression on his face was one of defeat, masked by stubborn pride. "You cannot win against me forever, Lorenzo," Salvatore hissed, voice strained. "Perhaps not," Lorenzo replied, lowering his gun, "but I can win today, and today I reclaim my life." The last of Salvatore's guards fell to Lorenzo's relentless assault. Salvatore stood, hands trembling slightly, a man stripped of control yet still carrying the weight of a patriarch. "You are ruthless," Salvatore admitted, his voice soft. "Yes," Lorenzo said, "and now I am free." Bloodied, bruised, exhausted, Lorenzo walked out of the estate. The rain had returned, washing away the blood on his skin, but not the memories of betrayal. He felt lighter, unshackled, not by law, not by authority, but by breaking free from the chains of his father's cruelty. Lorenzo returned to Calabria the next day. Alessia waited in the safe house, Matteo cradled against her chest. She did not rush into his arms. She did not forgive with a word. Instead, she let him stay, let him try, let him earn his place as Matteo's father. He knelt before them, hands trembling as he reached for his son. "Matteo," he whispered, voice breaking, "I'm here. I'm yours." Alessia watched him carefully. Her eyes softened slightly but remained guarded. "You will have to earn your place, Lorenzo. Not with words, but with actions." And so he began. The dismantling of the darkest parts of his empire. The corruption, the extortion, the lives ruined for profit. He destroyed it piece by piece. He focused on legitimate businesses, investments, and security for Alessia and Matteo. Every action documented, every gesture a proof of his devotion. The bond between them grew slowly, painfully, but inevitably. He learned patience, restraint, and the delicate art of rebuilding trust. Alessia, sharp and brilliant as ever, became an ally in his reconstruction, not just of empire, but of family. They ventured outside, walking along the soft sand of a secluded beach at dusk. Matteo's tiny hand clutched Lorenzo's finger as Alessia walked beside him. The sky burned in reds and golds, the sun slipping beneath the horizon. For a brief moment, the world felt safe. But shadows never disappear completely. From the cliffs above, a figure watched them. Hidden in the jagged rocks, a gun gleamed in the fading light. A Visconti crest ring glinted on one finger, the mark of someone with a claim, a vendetta, and a plan. The figure's eyes narrowed. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured. And below, Lorenzo and his family laughed softly, unaware of the storm still waiting to strike. The shadow whispered to himself, voice cold and low, "The line of Visconti is mine to control." And soon, the dawn, his wife and that child will learn the cost of defiance.